Hello, everybody. Welcome from literally all over the world. I can already see who's joining us today, and I am incredibly excited to welcome people from everywhere from Brazil to Mumbai to Cape Town. So, welcome. Hi, I'm Suzanne Gibbs Howard. I am the founder of IDEO, and I welcome you to the Creative Confidence Podcast, where I always have conversations with special guests about creativity, leadership, innovation, and growth. And today I have a very special guest, Alex Gallafent. Hello, Alex.
Hi, Suze.
Welcome. And Alex is one of our best and most provocative storytellers at IDEO. He is a director, senior director of narrative and strategy at IDEO. And we are going to talk today about the art of storytelling, how to give a better, more impactful, and more persuasive conversation. So we're going to be diving into some of Alex's top tips, but as always, we're experimenting and doing things differently. And we're going to do this in a way where we've invited on some of our community members to share a presentation or a story that they're working on. And then Alex is going to give them live feedback. So we're very excited about that. A little bit more about Alex. So Alex is a senior design director at IDEO. At IDEO, he has worked with major clients in everything from media to government to civic innovation to financial empowerment, hospitality, financial services, and beyond. You name it, he's touched it. He's also a teacher. He teaches design thinking, storytelling, and research at institutions like New York University, the School of the Visual Arts, and the New School in Manhattan. Prior to IDEO, Alex, you'll know why as soon as you hear his luscious voice. He's been a correspondent for public radios, The World, and the BBC World Service. He's presented and reported on everything from the rise of digital gurus in India to the intersection of religion and public health in Southern Africa. So currently, Alex is working with IDEO's Design for Food Global Impact Practice, and he's supporting some key clients through the depth of his craft. So I'm so excited to have you here today.
That was very, very flattering, Suze. Face for radio. Also, I will say, like, I turned the chat off because it was a little overwhelming, but just the sheer range of people from all over the world. I expect that there are some extraordinary storytellers here on this call. And so I'm flattered by the opportunity to sort of chat in front of this group. And, very excited to learn as much as I can offer tips.
Wonderful. And I know we love it when your conversation in the chat is going as much as we are here in the epicenter. And so please ask your questions at the last few minutes. We will get to your questions. So we welcome those. So our packed agenda today, we're going to jump right into it. I thought I'd do one little warm-up question with Alex, which is this. So Alex, you're one of our top storytellers. What are some of the things that are in the forefront of your mind in your personal practice or tips that you feel like you're constantly giving to other people about telling stories?
Well, in New York, I used to perform improvisational theater. And I was thinking about this as maybe a good example to get into this conversation. Now, if you've encountered improv before, the idea is that it's performers on a stage responding to a suggestion from a member of the audience. And then the game is that you make up the performance, you make up the little play or the scene totally from nothing. Everything is made up. And on the stage, there's also nothing in the way of props, maybe a couple of chairs. But what's remarkable, and I wouldn't put myself in this category at all, but what's remarkable about really extraordinary top quality improvisers is that they are able to build the world of that story with nothing other than commitment to the essential idea, commitment and partnership with the audience, and commitment to each other, agreements about what's going on, and the specificity and the detail of those worlds. And suddenly you realize you're looking at two people on an empty stage, but you're seeing a jungle and you're seeing them exploring it and you're seeing them picking a leaf in detail and examining it. That is the power of extraordinary storytelling, that magic thing that happens between presenter, storyteller, and audience, and everything else is a prop. we're going to spend some time looking at slides, but if there's anything I want people to take away is this idea that the slides are not the story. The slides are not the presentation. The slides are a prop. They're incredibly valuable, powerful. Aesthetics matter, structure matters, slides matter when you're using them, but they're not the story. The story is that thing that happens in between. And so hold on to that. And I think that'll be some of what I hope we'll talk about today.
That is fantastic. Excuse me.
No worries. Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm fine. I love that point about the partnership between the audience, the presenter, the avoidance of props being the center. That is so true. I'm going to get us on to our first guest as we start to do this technique today. Let's go ahead and bring up Andy. And Andy, I'm going to introduce a little bit about Andy Russell to all of you as we go on, and then we'll dive into his presentation.
Hey, Andy.
Hey, Alex.
One run, my friend, one run. I presume you follow cricket. That was pretty extraordinary. For anyone who doesn't know, New Zealand just beat my native country, England, by one run in a test match, and it was one of the best things I've ever seen. So congratulations.
Oh my goodness. Yes. So Andy is in New Zealand. I want to welcome you from tomorrow for the rest of us. So thank you for joining us early in your morning. So Andy is a chef by trade. He's cooked in restaurants all around the world. But he also has spent the last 12 years working in tech for a digital product studio. So he's bringing like chef and digital products together. So last year, he was working on his master's and started to tackle this project about the problems that families face when it comes to cooking dinner. If you have a family, you know what a problem dinner can be. Who cooks? What are you going to cook? Where are you going to get the ingredients, the recipes, let alone is it possibly healthy? So today, Andy's going to share with us a presentation for a product that he developed. His product is called Tiny Recipes. It's designed to make it easier for families to cook dinner by giving them simplified, personalized recipes that even a child could cook. So the presentation is a pitch to the potential consumer to tell them how and why Tiny Recipes will solve their dinner woes. And ultimately, the goal is to get people to sign up. So I'm going to go ahead and we'll pull up Andy's presentation. I'll pass it over to you, Alex.
Brilliant. Thanks, Suze. Andy, thank you so much for sharing this. This is awesome. I'm curious just by like asking you to help orient us to what we're looking at here. We're not going to keep this on screen for long, but if I'm correct, the first sort of section starting top left and then moving across and then downwards, the setup is essentially like a little story about a family and a family situation in the current state. And then after the aha moment, we start talking about the product, Tiny Recipes. Is that about correct?
Yeah, the speaker notes are on the bottom of the slides that I have. But what I tried to do in the presentation is take the audience on a journey of the problems that they're likely to have and empathize with at the start, and then what they're currently doing with those problems, and then showing other companies that are trying to solve the problem and how they're not quite working, and then sort of the aha moment and trying to take them on a journey on a different approach.
I love that. One of the things that I really appreciate, sometimes presentations, especially about products, begin with a product, like, product slide number one, I'm going to put it on a pedestal, and you haven't done that. You've begun with a situation, a context, a universe, and a state of affairs that's currently unsatisfactory. Presentation is kind of one of those, it can feel, at least to me, like a scary word sometimes. When I give it a capital P, it's like I'm presenting the big thing to the world and hoping that people will like it. Whereas there's another meaning to the word presentation, which is like the small p, where it's like an offer, a gift. It's like something I'm presenting, I'm putting in front of you, hoping that it's going to resonate. So I love that you went for a more human form of presentation, presenting this idea, this notion of a family. A couple of things that I noticed, if it's helpful. So one, I'm curious about like the almost like the camera angle that you've selected to describe this family at the beginning. It's sort of like in cinematic language, it's sort of like, it's like mid-focus. The photographs are, I think, stock photos principally. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Great. So the stock photos, they all show families sort of as a group. We don't necessarily see them in a state of sort of any like emotional specificity. We're seeing them cooking. We're seeing them tired in that one. They're all different families as well. So one of the things that has an effect, at least for me, is to take me out of the story. I'm seeing more high level abstracted theme, and I'm feeling less of an emotional connection to this archetype or this imaginary family that might like hook me right from the beginning about the emotional need that's going on. So that could be one thing to try out. Like, how could you thread together this opening sequence, almost like playing out an imaginary story, giving them names, showing them in details. What would it actually look like to have a shot that's less about the whole family and more about, a bowl of food, or a messy, bowl of cereal that's at dinner time, instead of like the sort of the more generic moments that we have right now. So that might be, how does that resonate with you?
Yeah, no, I can do that. I could even use my own family, because what I'm trying to convey is the problem isn't solved by skill. So my chef background doesn't solve the problem. So, and I've got a busy family, a blended family of 6 kids. So I've got that problem as well.
I love that. And actually you bring your own family in midway through, but the photo doesn't show you in that state. It's a photo of your family and you're all together, but like, it's not about the topic. So tying those two things together could be super cool. And actually you're hinting at a degree of vulnerability that you might be comfortable, and not everyone is, but you might be comfortable bringing to the opening of the story by zeroing in on your own circumstance, the set of challenges that you yourselves are confronting. I had one like question for you. So is the problem fundamentally about food, or is the goal about something deeper than food, and food is the mechanism to get there? I have a hunch, but I'm curious for you, what is the thing that's being solved by the product?
Sharing the load so everyone can contribute and connect. So what I found was there's a primary cook mainly in every house, and they're worn out and they're tired and they're over it. And if you can enable non-cooks and children to be able to also choose dinners, plan what's for dinner, even cook dinner, and share the load over different nights, you can have a family environment where everyone's contributing. It's all a bit more balanced out, and it's just, so my approach to the problem is incorporating more of the family to the planning and cooking of food.
I love that. And I think you've hit the nail on the head. And I think you could afford to highlight one element of that, which is this is about helping families share and connect. It so happens that food is both part of the problem and in your product, part of the solution. But the fundamental goal is to essentially allow a family to be a family in a healthy, flourishing way. And to me, that sort of central drive, like emotional impetus, is critical to this, so that it doesn't quickly turn into a presentation about the mechanics of food and cooking. It's critical, but like the fundamental impulse strikes me as if that it's about like, how do we help families share the load, connect with each other, be families, not be sort of like dispersed and diffuse in their energies and exhausted all the time, be able to be together as a unit. And food is a principal way to do that. And this product, therefore, is a way to bring that to life.
This is great. I think what we're doing today, just catching up a couple people who joined a little bit late, is we're looking at the structure of a couple people's presentations, because each of these presentations is longer than 2 minutes. We're not having people present everything, but looking, as you can see here, at a bird's eye view of the presentation. And so what I'm hearing in this one is that Andy made some bold moves storytelling wise by starting off with a really human story about a family that, and their qualms and their trials and tribulations with regard to food before diving into everything about the Tiny Recipes pitch. And Alex, where you're pushing it further is to say, to make it even a more specific family, to follow one family's journey. It could even be Andy's family. And then maybe, Andy, I know when you've talked about your pitch, you zoom out and you say, I'm one of these families. And so that could be even more explicit in the presentation. Alex, is that kind of accurate for what we're saying?
Absolutely. With the ad, that I believe that there is an implied human truth at the heart of Andy's story about what it means to be a flourishing family at its best, that can afford to be picked out. And actually, your opening and closing slide is the George Eliot quote. What do we live for if not to make life less difficult for each other? Which is not about food. It's about the quality of a family that's flourishing. So leaning into that impulse, I think, will help situate this problem. It's expressed through food, and the solution expressed through the product in an even richer and more anchored way.
I think with that, we're going to close it up with Andy. We'll wrap up with you a little bit more after this, but thank you, Andy, for sharing your presentation at a high level with us today.
Thank you.
For those of you just joining, we're doing something called live feedback, where we've invited people to submit a presentation that they can get Alex Gallafent's expert feedback on. And we're looking at the overarching structure of those presentations rather than listening to them go through the entire thing. So thank you all for coming on with us. With that, I'm going to bring on our second person today, Elaine Yang. So Elaine, welcome to the show. I'll give you a little bit of context for background so that you can be up to speed. We'll show that bird's eye view overview of the conversation and the presentation, and then Alex and Elaine will dive in. So Elaine is currently working for the federal government as a strategic planner for areas and infrastructure systems across the Nevada National Security Site. She has a background in urban planning. And so prior in her career, she was leading a housing element update for an affordable housing project with the city council in a city, Claremont, California. And so the presentation that Elaine is sharing with us and giving us a little peek at today is from her time with that city council in California. And it's a proposal that she submitted to that council. And I think a lot of us can identify with this moment. You have this big proposal that you're submitting to a lot of people. They're going to ask a lot of questions. So she had 9 members of the city council she was presenting to, as well as nearly 100 community members who are listening in. So you can imagine all of the range of questions she's trying to prepare for. But her goal was to make the case for an affordable housing project that she and her team had developed. So I want to say welcome to you, Elaine. We'll bring up just the overview of your presentation to give people a sense of it. And with that, Alex, I'll have you take it away and see how you can help Elaine with some feedback.
Hi, Elaine. Thanks so much for this.
Hi, thank you.
What is it like seeing it again? Like, since 2017, how does it land with you?
It feels pretty good. I question my font decisions, but overall, I feel like the content was concise and in some cases, perhaps it was a little bit more text per slide than I would do now.
Mm-hmm. So I'm curious about the jobs to be done in this presentation. What were the things that you needed to land and make happen as a result of it? Sue's mentioned a couple, but was this also a leave behind document? Was this both making a persuasive case? Was it also a call to action? What was the work that this had to achieve, the presentation and the slides?
Ultimately, I was trying to present to the city council, the reviewing body, what the housing element update consisted of, what we did. And this housing element update was a state mandated required update. And so if we didn't get that approval from city council, we would be not compliant with state regulations. And as Sue's mentioned, a huge part of the housing element update was to show that the city could accommodate a certain number of affordable housing within the city. But in order to do that, we needed to do a lot of changes to the zoning and the municipal code to make sure that we could do so. So it was a pretty complex presentation.
Really complex. So maybe there are two ways for us to explore this presentation, and we'll take them one by one. The first is, I'm curious, like, what were the tonal qualities that you needed to hit for this to be successful? So was this about, an explanatory tone? You just needed to be ultimately clear, or was it about confidence? And we can talk about how you went about achieving those tones and if there are other approaches to do that.
I was definitely trying to achieve a tone of confidence, of calmness, and of knowledge, being knowledgeable. Right before the meeting or the day before the meeting, my city manager had me do the presentation beforehand, and his one word of feedback or one item of feedback was to turn down my excitement. So I did my best to channel my 60 or 70-year-old father, in all of his seriousness and not didacticness, but just like, very serious, present the project.
And did you present pretty much what's on the screen, or were there some slides, some moments where it was more like, look, here is evidence, but I'm not going to speak to it. Just know that it's there. Or were you really going through each slide and sort of taking people through the details?
I went through each slide and I went through the details for sure. Yeah, it was really important for them to understand everything in the presentation. This presentation was accompanied by like a 22-page staff report, but the dirty secret is that they often don't read it. So this presentation was kind of making sure that they were fully on the same page as us regarding why the housing element update was needed, how we were achieving the affordable housing, and what actions they needed to take.
Yeah, this feels like one of those moments where, it's a bit of a truism that, the tell people what you're going to say, tell them, and then tell them what you said. Like the presentation feels like an executive summary, but it almost feels like it demands an executive summary to the executive summary up the top. The most distilled version of what you described, what's going on, why it's important, and the action they need to take. I could imagine that actually being a preface to going into that detail, because the challenge that I can imagine for someone receiving this presentation, especially receiving it, watching the slides go past, perhaps not being able to refer to anything, maybe like trying to capture notes along the way, is holding the construction of this argument. Such a different story to Andy's. This is a complex piece of argument that you're constructing moment by moment, piece by piece. So almost providing for people a mental model of some scaffolding. Like, this is how the jigsaw piece is going to add up. This is the shape you need to hold in your head of what I'm building towards, that people can refer back to. Might be an interesting way to buy yourself permission to get to this level of detail. The other thing I'm curious about, and it might be that one technique is to sort of vary this move along the way, is different ways to communicate confidence and clarity. Sometimes actually density is exactly what you need. Because, I remember a project, not a presentation, but it was a project for financial consumers. And we had prototyped sending a letter out that was, we thought, very clear, very distilled, like didn't have too much stuff on the page. And actually a lot of the feedback from consumers, from people, was, I don't believe this. There aren't enough words on the page for me to feel like this is authoritative and real. So there might be moments where actually density is necessary to communicate confidence. But there may also be moments where the essential truth of something that you're trying to communicate is lost in the blur. It's like, what of these 3 points do I really need to remember? Or what does this table actually mean? Is there a summary sentence that just like distills the essence of what you're trying to communicate? So moving between those polarities could be an interesting technique to try and determine when you want to go dense, when you want to go clear. Suze, I think you're jumping.
I think this is great. I'm going to do my best to wrap up all of this. And thank you, Elaine. And I really want to give a shout out extra to you, because your context is so tricky. Like that point about somebody telling you to control your enthusiasm that is the unique context of presenting to this kind of government client and trying to command respect and have authority and have confidence and show that you know your business in that context. So super, super tricky context. I think some of the things that I was hearing from Alex is to think about the jobs to be done from your presentation. And sometimes it's so often that we're using a talk or a piece of storytelling to serve more than one purpose at once. It's the leave behind and the presentation. And maybe it's great to make something different for the presentation and attach all of the leave behind as an appendix or things you can call up with questions. I also heard Alex talking a lot about complex presentations and explanatory bits and different ways that you can communicate confidence. I think it is so common for all of us to capture all of the details and see that as the means to show what's going on, and there are other ways. I'll share one little tip that I use sometimes, and I've seen a lot of teams do this, is get everything in there, put it all in there, and then wrap up with if there was one big thing I wanted you to remember, the thing I want you to take away from this, say that right up front, because that communicates confidence. And then they listen to all of the other data and information that you're giving them with that filter. And that can be a really helpful way to help them digest all of that information and do something with it, not just glaze over when you've put your heart and soul into presenting this.
I know we have to move on, but there's one thing we didn't quite get to, but I would love if we were able to, just thinking more about the audience. So what are they bringing into the room when they encounter this information? Like, have they just come from lunch? Have they come from another meeting that looks just like this, if not with as elegant font choices? Are they going to another meeting afterwards like this? And that's actually something you can even prototype. You can sort of play out for yourself with a team. Like, let's do a session. Now let me practice the presentation, then go somewhere else, and then see, what are the ways that this can stand out or be approachable or more memorable in the context of a larger suite of activities that your audience may be engaged in.
Wonderful. With that, we're going to wrap it up with Elaine. Thank you so much for your bravery, for sharing, and for your hard work in affordable housing.
Thank you, Elaine.
Don't miss that.
Thank you.
We are going to bring up our third guest, and just updating folks who have joined us at various points. We're doing something a little different today. Instead of just Alex lecturing to you about his top tips for storytelling, we're bringing tips about storytelling and presentation to life through something we call live feedback. So literally, we've invited people to submit something that they're working on or have presented to Alex, and Alex is right here going to give them live feedback to bring that to life for you. For those of you who want to follow on at the end, we always wrap up these tips. And if you've signed up for this webcast, you will get an email with the wrap up afterwards. So thank you, everyone. And Cesare, a little bit of background on you. Cesare is joining us from Ottawa, Canada. He is a senior business analyst at the Transformation A Accelerator Hub for the Government of Canada. And he helps his clients to accelerate the transformation or change that they're going through. So Cesare has shared a presentation with us that he developed to start educating his team and peers about agile. So agile is an iterative approach to project management and often software development. And so Cesare did something really cool and innovative here. He not only, some of the things he was doing was dispelling common myths about agile that he had seen in his organization, but his presentation is meant to be highly interactive and engaging. He's built it onto Miro Whiteboard, which is a digital collaboration space instead of into slides. And he was inviting folks to start thinking differently about what they do. So he's presented this a few times, and he'll often also send out this Miro board to peers with hopes that they'll engage with the content on their own. So with that, I'll pass it over to Alex, and Cesare is all yours.
Hey, Cesare.
Hi.
How is this going so far? Like, can you share a little bit about how deploying this has gone with your teams and what the format looks like?
Yeah. So our team at the Accelerator Hub is introducing a lot of new ways of thinking and mindsets to the government. which is a very kind of hierarchical structure and is very used to working in waterfall kind of project management. But there's a lot of talk about Agile. There's a lot of misunderstanding about it. So we wanted to combine and do a few things with this presentation, not only talk about Agile and to non-technical audiences, because Agile has been used in IT environments, but now it's coming a little bit more to different types of teams. So we wanted to show it to them that it's not overwhelming, dispel some of the myths about it. So also at the same time, use innovative presentation tools that are not just sort of talking at you, but are kind of living artifacts that invite engagement. So each slide has stickies where the participants can go and actually click and provide feedback. They can even put and I often have some stickies that people put right all over the place with their feedback and comment. As we go through, I always do little changes. If I get some feedback that something is not clear, I always ask the participants to spend some time after or even during the presentation, and I try to improve. So it's like a ongoing evergreen beta. Few things at the same time we try to do with that.
I love that. Thank you so much for that context. So there are a few things that I really appreciate here. I love that you've made it participatory, making space for people to show up and join in and add and comment and evolve it with you. And it's not sole authorship in that respect. I love that it is a living document that presumably people can refer to as well as they're making choices and they're going about their work. So it has a different flavor of utility than a simple sort of straightforward, I'm going to tell you this on this one occasion. But occasion-based sort of use feels like an interesting potential topic for us. When I first encountered this, I thought, how would I feel if this is how I encountered Agile for the very first time? And I felt overwhelmed. I felt like there is a lot here. I don't know if you know the line from Hamlet, suit the action to the word and the word to the action. I probably messed that up a little bit, but essentially it's about making sure that the form and the format of what you're communicating is in tune with the message that you're communicating to. And I know that one of the Agile principles that you pick out deep in one of these slides is around simplicity. And I'm craving some simplicity here because I'm just getting lost. This framework and there's another framework and there's another framework, which is incredible as a resource to be able to go back to. But I'm curious how it's felt to sort of like walk people through such a range of mental models and frameworks and mindsets and lists and all the rest of it. Has it felt overwhelming, or have you actually deployed this piece by piece and therefore you've never actually had a situation where everyone's had to take a lot in at the same time?
It's I think you made a very good observation. Sometimes my team always gives me feedback, and especially in the beginning as we were getting used to one another, that I can be very overwhelming because there's like all these ideas that I would like to. I come from an education background. Okay, I was a teacher for a very long time, and I always realize there's very little time, and I try to cram as much information as I can. So this is actually in my kind of for what I produce. This was a 35 to 40 pages slides presentation, which I was trying to cram into as few slides as possible, and maybe that's what's happening here, because I knew I only have like a one shot. Well, I didn't want it to be as informative as possible.
That's a question that there's a hypothesis there, or there's an assumption that presentations are necessarily a one moment proposition, but maybe that's not the case. That's certainly not how we teach in schools. And if you're a teacher, you know that you build lessons over time. So what is to say that your presentation around this topic could not be a series of presentations, moment by moment, building knowledge, building confidence, step by step, adding to the store of awareness around Agile in your team? There's another trick I think that you've sort of left unexplored, which is the myths. I love that you pick out that that your impetus for doing this is to dispel some common myths about Agile, but you haven't articulated the myths, and I'm desperate to know what they are. Those could be a really powerful way for you to structure this content. Myth number one, Agile is complicated. I don't know, I'm making this up. But then you have some tension built in for you to respond to, and something for people to sort of wrestle with in their head and hang on to. That just might give this content something to hang on to, rather than sort of floating out there as like just another way of, of thinking about work.
I'm going to
That-
jump in
yeah.
here with one idea, which is something that we teach in one of our storytelling courses, Storytelling for Influence. And it's because, Cesare, I so resonate with you. I'm an educator myself, and I get so excited about all the content. I want people to have all of it. And one of the things that I've learned over the years through others is to pull back and think about what is the one big idea that we actually need to focus on. And the way to get there is through something that we call the bar test, which is to pretend that you're just, you and Alex are at a bar having a drink, and you're like, I'm working on this thing. And Alex says, tell me what's the big idea? What is the big thing you want to get across about Agile? So could you like pretend you've got a cup of tea or coffee or a cocktail in hand? What would you tell Alex about Agile?
Agile is not what you think. Agile is a lot of things that you might have heard about, and it's actually something that I do in the first slide. It's if you zoom into the first slide, it would really make sense, because I say Agile is not just being flexible and being able to stand on your hand while you're actually composing something beautiful. And then I go into talking about the difference of what the public servants are very familiar with, which is a very kind of a traditional project management, which is like an orchestra. And I contrast that with, it's more like a jazz improv. That's what Agile is all about. That's where it comes from. And then I jump in and sort of try to look at the values really quickly. And then I talk about the principles, that it's an actual manifesto. It comes from Agile Manifesto, the values.
So-
That is
So
great,
try to
right
tell
there.
that
Yeah.
kind of a story and
Yep.
bring them into it and make it excited. There's a lot of talking in the first slide, and maybe that's not reflected in visually, but
Yes,
I do tell the story of the history of it,
that's
and
great.
that to get the people excited.
Yeah,
Cesare,
Alex.
and I just love that you've landed on a metaphor that resonates for you. The difference between, you know, operating like an orchestra and operating like a jazz group. I would encourage you to, you know, select that metaphor and sort of pursue it. You know, a lot of the images on the subsequent slides are, you know, from different metaphors, and maybe there is some utility and some power in, you know, choosing one, seeing how rich it is and seeing how well it's able to capture the things that you want to communicate. So that's one recommendation. The other thing is, you know, I saw this in the chat as well. There is a question here about when is a presentation a presentation? When is a presentation a workshop? When is a presentation actually turning into a piece of documentation? So it might be that there are different formats that are more appropriate, that you could build off this, you know, this central repository to get to the presentation form, like the first introduction version of this, where it's like simplified on the slides. You're picking a single metaphor so that everyone has the same mental model to pursue as they're getting to grips with the idea initially. And then you move, as people, you know, get further into the details, towards a format like this, where participation becomes more relevant, where you can start introducing a greater level of granularity. So just being intentional about the moment you and your audience is in, and then tuning and tailoring the content to serve that need.
Awesome. I think we're going to close up with Cesare there. I think each of these three presentations is just an awesome work in progress, and fantastic story to start with. And we wanted to get to some of those level 2, 3, 4 kinds of feedback. So I'm going to try to summarize across all of them to close it out. But Cesare, some of the things that I heard Alex talking about with you is, you know, that instead of that feeling of overwhelm and giving people everything that you want them to know, how can you peel back and start to understand what the big idea is, the singular, you know, if it's all about jazz over an orchestra, how does that metaphor ring throughout? How does that become the one major thing that you want people to know? And then I think also what I'm hearing inherent in that is, as you practice your presentation time and time again, and you get feedback from people, that can hone your prototype. And that's the best way when you're a teacher who's super passionate about a topic to know, what do you make the centerpiece and what do you leave on the cutting room floor? I think that rolls me back to things that we heard for Elaine. I think a lot of great tips in there also about being really mindful of the job to be done for the particular moment that you're presenting. Is it a leave behind? Is it a presentation? Is it an executive summary? And making things for that unique context, that specific audience. is something that I really learned and heard you talking about with Elaine's presentation, balancing that complexity of the information to be presented and that desire to show confidence and knowledge, but also still making sure you have a clear, crisp, clean presentation. And then with Andy backing up to that, where we started with his pitch about tiny recipes, there we really went back to some of the places that we always talk about with human-centered storytelling. How do you take something, even if it has a pitch purpose or an informational purpose, and certainly make it human? Show why you care, show why you're passionate about it, share something about yourself, share a human story. Maybe that human story is even about you. And that's a way to make it deeply, deeply memorable and personal. So all of these are some of the things that we learned through this unique approach that we were giving to storytelling, going through live feedback with Alex. Alex, is there anything that I missed in my summary that you want to make sure that people have today?
Well, there's one thing, and I spotted it in the chat as well, and it's around metaphor. So one last thought. I mean, I often go to metaphor. I like metaphors. I think they're poetic. I think they provide scaffolding that other people can share. But they're only useful if everyone gets them. Like, if you have to explain the subject of the metaphor as well as explaining the content of your presentation, maybe it's not the right choice. So not every storytelling presentation requires a metaphor. But if there is a metaphor that fits perfectly, that everyone in your audience can latch onto and can understand, it can be a spectacular way to supercharge and accelerate the path to understanding, onto which you can then lay much more detail. So yeah, yay metaphor, but is it an obligation? Absolutely not. And choose them carefully.
Nice. Wonderful. So I think today we've filled up all of our time with these live feedback sessions. Please let us know. Send us a note, shoot us something on social media, or send us an email to let us know what you thought about this format. We wanted to try something a little different. We're always changing it up with you. Today, we've been hearing from Alex Gallafent, the Senior Director of Narrative and Strategy at IDEO. He's an instructor in our presentation called Impactful Presentations. We also have another one called Storytelling for Influence. So those are places where you can learn the basics of storytelling, but we wanted to get into some more of the advanced stuff here today. Today, we're also offering a one-time use discount code for our March course run. So you can use Engage and Inspire 15 ! To save 15% on your next course purchase. And enrollment for our next course run is open until March 7th. And so with that, I just want to say thank you, especially to Alex and the 3 people who came on sharing their presentations. Been an absolute gift having you with me. Thank you, Alex, for all of your
pleasure. Thank you.
And thank you to our community for showing up, giving feedback, participating from wherever you are all around the world. See you next time. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.